Hello, hello, everyone, and welcome to Nonprofit Enthusiast Live. I'm your host, Lasheena Williams, and I am so excited to be here with you all to continue our conversation on community building. So, that has been the theme for the month. If you missed any of our past sessions, please go back and make sure that you check our guide section of the group. So, today I am going to talk a little bit about being able to, and I know a lot of nonprofits have reached out and asked about ways that they can get a location for their nonprofit organization. So, I'm going to talk a little bit about that today and just kind of some tips and tricks and things to consider when looking for a location for your nonprofit, whether you have an existing location and looking for something bigger, or you don't have a location but just kind of want to plan ahead and look at what this can look like for your organization. So that's what we're going to talk about. And the reason why I thought it was important to include in community building, because we know for some of our nonprofits, we have to rely on other community organizations in order to be able to have a space to operate. And I'll talk a little bit about that later on. Okay, so the first thing I will recommend that you look into is planning out your needs for your space. So creating a list of what specific needs your organization has when it comes to a space for your nonprofit. Let's say you're a youth organization and you're planning to have the youth come to your facility. What does that mean? And of course, if you have a certain age group, there are some requirements as to the amount of bathrooms and the height of the sink and different things like that, depending on the age group that you're working with. So those are the type of factors that you want to look at for your organization. So what is the specific space requirements for your organization? I know for us, we were recently looking for locations, and we knew that we wanted to have a space where if at least if we could have two or three spaces to be able to operate youth programming, one that can the youth can go in and eat in, because some community organizations will not allow you to eat in all of the rooms. So we knew that was one of the things, and then also having an outdoor space was another thing that we were looking for. So having this list did help us, at least when we're going out trying to establish partnerships to get low to no cost facility usage. We were able to share this information with them and let them know exactly what we're looking to do. We were also able to share what kind of programming we're looking to make happen in there, and then also share how it aligns with that location. So just something to consider. I know I'm getting ahead of what I was actually planning to talk about today, but just some things to consider. So on that list, you want to also identify the things that are non-negotiable and the things that are desirable. Like if we have this is a bonus, but it's not required for us to do what we need to do within the space. So having that is extremely helpful. And also, break down the functions of each space. What are some things you're planning to do with it? An example I gave, like for us, we knew the lunch room will probably be, or the lunch area would probably be a main area where we could bring all of the youth together in that one room. They could have their meals in that room. So it's a gathering space for all the classes within the facility. So something to look into. Then identify possible locations. But before you do that, I would also say kind of determining whether you want to own, lease, or if you're looking for space at no cost or a very low cost, I'll say like a stipend, determining what that looks like for you and your budget. And then also considering sometimes when you get space at no cost, how flexible are you on the space requirements that you listed? So considering that, but it's not impossible. You can definitely, I've seen spaces that would work with different organizations that at low or no cost. So it's definitely out there. So having your list of what you need and what you're looking for is extremely helpful in this process. And then determining does our budget support us owning, leasing, or getting the space at no cost. Of course, everyone's gonna say no cost, but there's pros and cons to no cost. For some programs, if it's like we must have the space, we have to operate certain times, and we have very little flexibility, no cost might not be the best option for you, unless you find a really good partner or someone who's willing to work with you. The other thing about no cost to consider, no low cost when you're choosing an area, is looking at organizations that align with your mission, because does the work that they do align, and not only um, what can they do for you by providing a space, but what can you do for them. And that has been helpful over the years when I've had to find low and no cost space, is not only going in with, hey, this is what we're looking for, this is what it's going to do for the community, come on, we'd love to have you be a part of this, but then also learning about that space that we're going in. For instance, a university that we used, like prior to the pandemic, they would have family events and community events on an ongoing basis. So part of our initial conversations was not only, hey, can we use your space on an ongoing basis? And they gave us access to their entire campus. It was also, how can we support the initiatives that you have going on? And that was one thing that we made sure we did as a part of the relationship that we had with them. We did it with restaurants. In those early years, I remember us bouncing from restaurant to restaurant. We had a really good restaurant that had a private space, and we spoke to the manager, and they agreed that we can use that space at no cost when we need to meet. So we would tell them ahead of time, like, hey, this is when our meetings are going to take place. And what we would do, even though they didn't ask us to do it, is of course that restaurant is where we're buying the food for our meetings. So that way we're not only just using the space, but it costs us a lot less to have food for the meeting from that restaurant than it would if we had to rent the space, which was a really nice space that we use for meetings. So just consider that, whether you are in a position where you're ready to own and purchase a location. I've seen that where nonprofits will purchase a location, and they have a team or staffing that needs every room in there to operate, and some where what they'll do is sublease some portions of it to organizations that align with their mission, so that help offset some of the costs associated with the building. So just a thought there. So you definitely want to, once you kind of determine that, you want to identify possible locations in your area. Um, you can do this through asking those within your circle, or asking local restaurants, law enforcement. It's interesting because you would think you know your entire community, but it always amazes me when I find a new location, or just through asking someone that I never even knew was there. So definitely identifying possible locations, sharing what your intent is. Hey, I'm looking for a location at no cost that can help us further our mission. We're able to do XYZ. And what I found successful, and I'm sure others have other best practices, and if you have any other best practice for being able to locate a no or low cost space, please make sure that you drop that in the chat. And even if you have best practices for purchasing your spaces, or leasing your spaces out that you would like to share, please drop that information in the chat. We're a community. We rely on each other to be able to grow, and I'm sure through you sharing, you'll be able to help someone who's tuning in. So please share that in the chat. So something with the no cost locations that I would do when we're seeking them is, typically I like to meet with someone at the location. Maybe it's the manager, the campus manager, it might be whoever it is that has decision making skills. I'm not skilled, but they have the right to make decisions when it comes to being able to use that space, and kind of letting them know what we're looking to do, and kind of getting their feedback on whether they feel it's a good fit for their or organization or campus, depending on where you're going. From there, I typically like to do something a little bit more formal, where after that conversation, using what they share, the things that we kind of, we might find like, oh, this date and time, but we're flexible on date and time. They said this date and time works best for them. Using some of that information to come up with a formal proposal, even though it's a no cost, low cost location. I like to do this, coming up with some sort of formal proposal to be able to say, this is what we're looking to do, and we'd love to have you join us in this. And in that initial conversation, gauging how can we be a resource to each other. So just a little tips and tricks there, because I've seen this post did a lot. I've got this question a lot when it comes to how to get a location for my organization. Where should I start? And even if you're not at a place where you're ready for a location, it doesn't hurt to jot down what that might look like for you all. And then also, sometimes if you have an existing location, you have to take a look and see, is our current space stopping us from growing? And sometimes that could be either way. It could be it's too large and it's taking a lot of our budget, where it's taken away from certain parts of our program, or it's too small where we only could do certain things. We find ourselves renting these large spaces on a weekly basis, and we can put that toward being able to expand. So looking at what your current space needs are for your organization is definitely key. And then also, don't just think about the lease, or if you're owning, don't just think about just the mortgage, the lease. If you're doing a no cost, don't think about it just being free. Think about the additional costs that might come with this location. Do I need to pay for lights? In our example that I gave, I knew food. We're at the restaurant. We're going to invest. We're going to buy food for every meeting that we have there. So what does that look like? We still built a budget for that. And then how can we support each other when we have different events, helping them market what they do, and then also them still allowing us to use their space. Also thinking about, is there any, like in that situation, we couldn't alter that space. It was literally us just bringing what we need for that day and then taking it out. But let's say you have a location that allows you to have your own designated space, or have ongoing usage of a particular space. Is there any alterations that you need to do within that space? What does that look like? For instance, you might be using the church and you need a computer lab to be able to operate your program. Them giving you that entire space to be able to have that computer lab, thinking about things like, okay, is it going to be a shared computer lab? What are those? What is that going to look like? So think about all those different factors will come out um, that will happen as a result of, depending on what type of location that you're going with. So definitely, definitely. I know I shared a lot of different things, but I just wanted to bring this conversation up because I've seen it a lot, where nonprofits are trying to find whether it's their first space, determining whether it's time to expand. So I thought this was good for us to kind of just talk a little bit about this, especially in Community Building Month, where we're looking throughout the community for different resources, opportunities. Why not talk about it now? So you're planning. You're not just jumping out there. You're coming up with a list of specific requirements, your space requirements, what's non-negotiable, what's desirable. You're identifying any possible locations through, it might be surveying, interviewing, talking with local residents, law enforcement. You're taking a look at, also the demand for your nonprofit services in the area. And this is key because if you're in an area where you don't want to be in an area where you're like a secret in that area. You want to definitely be a resource to whatever community or whatever area that you join. You're determining whether you want to own, lease, or no cost. If what will work best for you, and understanding the limitations on each of them. Each of those areas, whether you own, you lease, or you get a place at no cost, or a very low cost, they each have their pros and cons. So taking a look at what does that look like for you all, and then also considering the other costs associated with you moving your nonprofit into a location. So I hope this helps someone that's thinking about whether it's expanding or getting into a space or downsizing. So Thank you, everyone. So I'm glad we were able to talk about that this month. Please, if you have any friends that need to listen to this, go ahead and tag them in the chat. If they're not in a group, go ahead and invite them to the group. If you're listening and you're catching this on replay, give us a hashtag replay so that we could continue to do these type of conversations and continue to empower each other together. And other than that, I will see everyone next week. Bye, everyone.